The starship Endeavour emerged from hyperspace into the Zirac system, its hull trembling from the intensity of the dimensional leap. Captain Elias Harper sat in the cockpit, his hand steady on the controls. Outside, the planet Zirac loomed, a desolate sphere of red and black, its atmosphere streaked with electrical storms that danced like angry gods. Few dared to even approach the system, let alone the planet. Elias had read the warnings, but his resolve was stronger than his fear. "This is madness, Captain," said Sari, the ship's onboard AI. Her voice was clipped and efficient, designed for utility rather than comfort. "Valix has a confirmed kill count exceeding entire planetary populations. Your survival probability is statistically insignificant." Elias smirked, adjusting his oxygen regulator. "Good thing I don't live by statistics, sorry. Besides, someone has to understand her. What if she's more than the monster they say?" Sari paused, her digital hesitation betraying the limits of her programming. "You are venturing into a death trap based on a hypothesis. No known life form has survived direct contact with Valix. The Galactic Council considers this a suicide mission. That's what makes it worth doing," Elias said, rising from his seat. He adjusted his utility belt, ensuring he had his translation chip and a handful of sensor modules. "If no one else has tried to talk to her, then maybe that's why no one's come back alive." The Endeavour entered Zirac's atmosphere, buffeted by violent winds and jagged bolts of crimson lightning. The ship groaned under the strain, but Elias had made the necessary modifications. A lesser vessel would have been torn apart by now, but the Endeavour held steady, descending toward the surface. The landing zone was a rocky plateau surrounded by a sea of bubbling magma. The air was thick with sulfur and heat, creating shimmering waves that distorted the horizon. Elias disembarked, his boots crunching against the brittle ground. His environmental suit shielded him from the worst of Zirac's conditions, but he could feel the oppressive weight of the atmosphere pressing against him. And then he felt a presence. The ground trembled, a low rumble resonating through the air. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and the sky darkened despite the blazing sun. Elias turned, and there she was. Valix. She emerged from a jagged ravine, her form immense and otherworldly. Her 6 limbs moved with a predatory grace, each step crushing the volcanic rock beneath her. Her wings unfurled, obsidian blades catching the light of distant lightning strikes. Her eyes, glowing like twin silver stars, locked onto Elias, pinning him in place with their intensity. Her voice wasn't a sound but a vibration, a psychic growl that resonated in his skull. "Another fool sent to die? They never learn." Elias exhaled slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. His training as a xenobiologist had prepared him for encounters with hostile life forms, but nothing could prepare him for her. Still, he forced himself to stand his ground, meeting her gaze. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his voice amplified by his suit's communicator. "I came to talk." Valix tilted her massive head, the movement almost feline. Her mandibles twitched, and Elias felt a wave of contempt roll over him like a psychic tide. "Talk? Do you believe I am some simple creature to be reasoned with? I have destroyed fleets. I have reduced worlds to ash. Your words are nothing to me." Elias's heart pounded, but he pushed forward. "Then why haven't you killed me yet?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, Valix hesitated. Her silver eyes narrowed, and Elias could sense her curiosity. No one had ever dared to address her like this, not with defiance, not without fear. She took a step closer, her immense shadow engulfing him. "Why indeed," she said, her voice quieter now, though no less threatening. "Perhaps I am curious. Your kind usually screams or begs. Yet you stand before me, trembling yet unbroken. Are you brave or merely foolish?" "Maybe a little of both," Elias admitted, his lips quirking into a faint smile. "But I think you're more than what they say you are. You're not just some mindless destroyer." Valix's mandibles clicked, a sound that might have been laughter or a warning. Bold words from such a fragile thing. But words will not save you if you displease me. Elias reached into his pack slowly, pulling out a scanning device. He held it up, showing her the screen. I'm a scientist. I want to learn about you not as a monster, but as a living being. Will you let me? Valek stared at the device, her glowing eyes unreadable. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, without warning, she lunged forward, her massive face stopping inches from Elias. He didn't flinch, though every instinct screamed at him to run. You amuse me, human, she said at last, her voice dripping with dark amusement. Very well. I will let you steady me. But know this, if I tire of your presence, your death will be swift. Elias exhaled, a shaky but relieved breath. Fair enough. As Valix retreated slightly, her immense form blending into the jagged terrain, Elias couldn't help but feel the enormity of what he'd just done. He had faced the most terrifying creature in the universe and survived. But he knew this was only the beginning. If he was to uncover the truth about Valix, he would have to prove himself not just brave, but worthy of her trust. And that, he suspected, would be the greatest challenge of his life. The days that followed Elias's initial meeting with Valix were unlike any he had ever experienced. Each morning, he awoke to find himself in the shadow of Zarak's bleak, volcanic landscape, and each day was spent in the presence of the most feared being in the galaxy. But it wasn't fear that gripped him, it was something far more complex. Curiosity. Elias had learned quickly that Valix wasn't just a mindless predator. Beneath her terrifying exterior lay an intelligence that had outlasted millennia. Every interaction revealed more about her, and every moment of silence between them spoke volumes. She was far more than the stories told by terrified witnesses across the galaxy. She was lonely. And she was angry. At first, their conversations were strained. Valix spoke little, her words cutting and cryptic, as though she spoke from a place of great bitterness. Her mind, he could tell, was an ocean of raw emotion, rage, sorrow, and a deep sense of betrayal that spanned eons. On the fourth day, Elias ventured further into Zarak's landscape. He carried his data pad, taking notes and measurements, but his real purpose was to learn more about the environment that had shaped Valix. The planet was toxic, yes, but there were signs of life, strange, twisted plant life and the remnants of long-forgotten ruins scattered across the barren plains. A civilization, perhaps? He had to know more. Valix followed him at a distance, her dark silhouette a constant, looming presence in his periphery. Her psychic whispers brushed against his mind, but she never spoke aloud. Elias tried not to let her overwhelming presence distract him from his work. He paused to examine the structure of a collapsed building, its walls covered in strange hieroglyphs, when Valix spoke this time, more directly, her voice clear in his mind. You seek answers, human, she said, her tone tinged with something that could almost be mistaken for amusement. But the answers you seek are not here. You will only find ruins and ghosts. Elias stood upright, wiping the dust from his hands. What happened here, Valix? Who lived in these cities? I think you know. Valix's voice reverberated in his skull, an echo of the past. They were my creators, she said, and the words were heavy, laced with years of hurt. The Archon. They built me, designed me as a guardian, a protector. I was their weapon. Elias turned slowly, his heart quickening at the mention of the Archon. He'd heard fragments of stories, ancient texts that spoke of a race with near-godlike powers, their empire stretching across the stars. But what had happened to them? Why had they disappeared? Did they abandon you? Elias asked carefully, already knowing the answer. Yes. The word was simple, but the depth of it crushed him. When their empire fell to their enemies, I was left behind. Alone. I hunted those who betrayed them. I hunted everyone. Elias could sense the weight of centuries in her words, the grief of an eternity spent alone. But there was something else beneath the sorrow, a profound rage that hadn't been quelled by time. It pulsed through the air, thick and heavy, as if the planet itself shared her pain. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "But you're not alone anymore. You don't have to be a weapon anymore." There was a long silence, broken only by the distant rumbling of Zarak's volcanic activity. For a moment, Elias thought she might ignore him, dismiss him as just another fool. But then she spoke again, her voice softer, almost wistful. "You don't understand, human. You cannot." She sighed deeply, the sound vibrating through his chest. "I was made for destruction. That is all I know. That is all I am." Elias shook his head, determined. "No. You are more than that. I see it. You've been twisted by your past, by what they made you. But you can change. We can change things together." Valix's psychic presence shifted, as if she were considering him, weighing his words carefully. She had never encountered a human who wasn't immediately terrified by her. Yet, here he was unafraid, yet understanding her pain, trying to reach her in a way that no one had before. He wasn't simply trying to survive her. He was trying to help her. "You are different," Valix admitted, though it wasn't entirely a compliment. There was still a thread of skepticism in her tone. "You speak of change. But change is impossible." Elias looked at her for the first time, as if he could see beyond the monster that the galaxy feared. He saw a creature, yes, formidable and dangerous, but also burdened by a past she never asked for. "You're right," Elias said, after a pause. "Change is difficult. But it's not impossible. And I think I can help you. I want to. You don't have to be the terror of the void anymore. Let me help you understand what else you can be." For the first time since they'd met, Valix fell silent. The air between them seemed to hold its breath, and Elias could feel the weight of her internal struggle. She wasn't ready to let go of the identity she had carried for millennia, nor the power that had made her feared. But the idea of change, of being something more than just a weapon, was new. And it was terrifying. The day ended without another word between them, but something had shifted. The next morning, Elias returned to the ruins, his data pad in hand. As he studied the broken walls, the twisted vegetation, and the faint remnants of a lost civilization, Valix stayed close, watching in silence. Her presence was not as oppressive now, not as threatening. She had accepted his offer, perhaps not fully, but enough to give him a chance. As Elias wrote his findings, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. The galaxy saw Valix as a monster, a terror. But Elias was beginning to see something else. There was a soul beneath her rage, and perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for redemption. And so, in the shadow of a broken empire, Elias Harper began his real mission, not just to study the monster, but to help her rediscover the possibilities of being something more. The galaxy learned quickly. The rumor that Captain Elias Harper had not only survived, but was actively communicating with Valix spread like wildfire. News networks speculated wildly, political leaders debated what this meant for galactic security, and opportunists in the darker corners of the universe whispered of a plot. Perhaps Elias had been enslaved or brainwashed by the monster. To the Galactic Council, the situation was unacceptable. A summit was called, and after heated deliberations, a decision was reached. If Elias Harper refused to abandon his foolish endeavor, a fleet would be dispatched to neutralize the threat once and for all. Elias, of course, was aware of the looming storm. The Endeavor's communication systems buzzed with intercepted transmissions, armada mobilizations, bounty postings, and grim discussions of collateral damage should Zarak's destruction become necessary. But Elias's focus was elsewhere, on Valix and the profound revelations she was beginning to share. The truth about Valix. Why do they hate you so much? Elias asked one day, his voice steady but curious. Valix sat, or rather perched, on a jagged rock overlooking a magma flow. Her massive wings were folded close to her body, their jagged edges shimmering in the molten glow. Her eyes, glowing silver as always, seemed distant, lost in thought. "Because they do not see me," she said, her voice calm yet cold. "They see a shadow of their fears, magnified by stories and screams. To them, I am not real. I am a legend they wish to erase." Elias knelt beside her, studying her profile. He could see the faint traces of scars on her chitinous armor, evidence of battles fought long before humanity had even left its home system. "But you're more than that. You've survived so much. You've been through things they can't even imagine." Valix turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes focusing on him. "Yes. And that is why they fear me. Fear is easier than understanding." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Elias knew fear well. It was the instinct that had driven entire species to flee from her presence. But understanding? That required patience, courage, and an openness that most lacked. It was what set Elias apart. But Valix's truth ran deeper than fear. Over the days that followed, she revealed fragments of her past, shards of memory that painted a clearer picture of the Archon and their ultimate betrayal. She had been created as their guardian, their protector, and for centuries, she had served them loyally. But when the Archon Empire collapsed under the weight of its own hubris, she was left behind, abandoned like an obsolete tool. It was the abandonment that had scarred her most, not the battles, not the destruction, but the knowledge that she had been discarded. "I see now," Elias said one evening, as the two stood beneath Zarak's storm-filled skies. "You're not angry because of what they did to you. You're angry because you cared about them, and they threw you away." Valix didn't respond at first, her wings shuddering as if buffeted by an invisible wind. Finally, she said, "Yes. And for that, I made the galaxy pay." The arrival of the fleet, they arrived without warning, a vast armada of warships, their engines casting a brilliant light against the dark void of space. The fleet encircled Zarak, blotting out the stars, and their presence cast an ominous shadow over the planet. This wasn't a diplomatic mission. This was war. Elias scrambled to prepare. He raced aboard the Endeavor, frantically sending hails to the lead vessels. "This is Captain Elias Harper. Stand down. You're making a mistake." His words fell on deaf ears. The fleet's flagship, a massive dreadnought, opened a channel, and the admiral's face appeared on Elias's console. Her expression was cold, her tone clipped. "You have 30 minutes to evaluate, Captain Harper. After that, Zarak will be reduced to ash. We cannot allow the threat of Valix to persist." Elias clenched his fists. "You're wrong about her. She's not what you think. She's not a monster. She was made into one, but she's trying to change." The Admiral's expression didn't falter. "Change is irrelevant. The risk is too great. I suggest you leave while you still can." As the transmission ended, Elias turned to Valix, who stood outside the ship, her immense form silhouetted against the molten horizon. Her wings flared slightly as she stared up at the descending fleet, her silver eyes narrowing. "They have come to kill me," she said simply. Elias stepped forward, his voice firm. "And you're not going to give them a reason to, Valix. You've shown me you can be more than what they fear. Let me talk to them. Let me make them see what I see." Valix tilted her head, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "And if they refuse to listen?" Elias hesitated, knowing the answer. "Then I'll stand with you." The plea for peace. Elias piloted the Endeavor directly toward the fleet, broadcasting on every frequency. His voice was calm but impassioned. "To the Galactic Council, to the admirals, to anyone who can hear me, listen. Valix is not what you think. She is not the mindless destroyer you feared for centuries. She is a survivor. She is a victim. And she is trying to change." His words caused a stir across the fleet. Some vessels hesitated, their engines dimming, while others powered up their weapons. The Admiral's voice crackled back over the comms. "Captain Harper, Your bravery is noted, but your naivety is staggering. We cannot take that risk. Elias's voice rose. Then why hasn't she attacked your fleet? She could have destroyed half your ships already, but she hasn't. Doesn't that tell you something? From the surface of Zarak, Valix stood motionless, her wings spread wide. She could feel the tension in the fleet above her, the hundreds of minds consumed by fear and doubt. She closed her eyes and made a choice. For the first time in centuries, she spoke directly to the galaxy. I am Valix, her voice boomed through the void, a psychic wave that resonated across every ship. And I am not your enemy. I have been feared, hunted, and hated for longer than you can imagine. But today, I choose something different. I choose peace. The fleet's weapons dimmed, the silence deafening. The turning point. The standoff lasted hours, but in the end, Elias's plea and Valix's unprecedented gesture broke through the fear. The fleet withdrew, not in surrender, but in cautious recognition that the universe's greatest terror was no longer a threat. For the first time, Valix was seen not as a monster, but as something far greater, a being capable of redemption. The once dreaded planet of Zarak, with its volcanic plains and constant storms, had become something extraordinary, a symbol of hope. Word of Valix's transformation spread rapidly, bolstered by Elias Harper's testimony and Valix's own public declaration of peace. For centuries, she had been a shadow over the galaxy, a being spoken of only in hushed tones. Now, she was a beacon of change, though her path forward would not be without challenges. The Galactic Council summoned the Galactic Council, comprising representatives from every major species, summoned both Elias and Valix to a summit on the neutral moon of Corvellis Prime. The vast chamber, carved from crystalline stone, glowed with ambient light, its walls lined with delegates who whispered anxiously as Valix entered. She did not stride into the chamber as a conqueror. Instead, she moved slowly, her immense form coiled in a way that conveyed respect rather than threat. Her wings remained folded, her claws deliberately kept away from the ground to avoid the terrible screech they could cause. Still, the delegates stared at her, their fear palpable. Elias walked beside her, his expression calm but determined. He knew the weight of this moment, how fragile the peace they had achieved truly was. The lead delegate, a tall, crystalline being from the Oran species, addressed them. Valix, you have called for peace. Yet you are responsible for the destruction of countless worlds. Why should we believe you have changed? Valix's silver eyes met the delegates. For a long moment, she said nothing, allowing the room to sink into silence. Then she spoke, her psychic voice filling the chamber like the hum of a distant star. Because I choose to be more than what I was made to be. My past is written in blood, but it does not define my future. If you doubt me, I do not blame you. But give me the chance to prove myself, and I will show you that even the most broken among us can heal. Her words carried an unfamiliar humility, one that disarmed even her harshest critics. Elias stepped forward, addressing the assembly. Valix is more than her past. She's already begun helping shattered colonies rebuild, using her strength to protect rather than destroy. She isn't asking for forgiveness today, she's asking for the opportunity to earn it. After hours of deliberation, the council reached a decision. Valix would be allowed to remain free under strict conditions. She would act as a galactic guardian, using her power to defend vulnerable worlds. But should she return to her destructive ways, the council reserved the right to respond with force. Valix accepted the terms without hesitation. The first test, Valix's first true test, came only weeks later. A small mining colony on the edge of the galaxy had been overrun by a rogue fleet of pirates. The Galactic Council hesitated to respond, fearing the colony was too remote to save in time. Valix and Elias had no such doubts. She soared across the void, her massive wings slicing through the blackness of space, the Endeavor trailing behind her. When they arrived, the pirates, a mismatched group of ships armed with crude weapons, fired on her immediately. Valix did not retaliate with destruction. Instead, she disabled their ships with precision, her acidic breath melting engines without harming the crews. She crushed weapons platforms underfoot but left the pirates alive, forcing their surrender without a single casualty. The miners watched in awe as the galaxy's most feared creature saved their lives. When the council learned of the event, their skepticism began to wane. Valix was proving that she could be more than a weapon of destruction, she could be a protector. The Queen of Stars. As the months passed, Valix's reputation began to change. The galaxy no longer whispered of her as a shadow of fear, but as a guardian of light. Elias played no small part in this transformation, guiding her with patience and understanding. He became her closest advisor, her friend, and the bridge between her and the countless civilizations that once despised her. At a ceremony held on a flourishing Zarak, the Galactic Council formally recognized Valix as the Queen of Stars, a title that acknowledged both her immense power and her commitment to peace. The barren planet, once feared, was slowly becoming a hub of diplomacy and unity. Delegates from across the galaxy arrived to witness the coronation, standing beneath the towering figure of Valix as she accepted the mantle with grace. Elias stood beside her, his smile faint but proud. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. Valix looked down at him, her silver eyes softer now, almost warm. "I had a guide," she replied. "One who saw me when no one else did. An era of peace." The galaxy entered a new era, one marked by unprecedented cooperation. Valix's presence as a galactic guardian deterred threats that once would have escalated into war. Pirates, rogue fleets, and warring factions thought twice before acting, knowing the Queen of Stars might descend upon them. But her impact went beyond deterrence. She became a symbol of redemption, proving that even the most feared and broken beings could find a new path. Her actions inspired others, leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike, to reconsider their own conflicts and seek peace where once there had been only violence. Elias remained by her side, traveling with her to distant worlds, helping her understand the complexities of the civilizations she now protected. Their bond deepened into something unique, neither purely friendship nor something as simple as romance. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. The quiet moment. One evening, after a particularly grueling mission defending a refugee convoy, Elias and Valix sat atop a ridge on Zarak, watching the twin moons rise. The volcanic storms had quieted, the once chaotic planet now seeming almost serene. "You're different now," Elias said, breaking the comfortable silence. Valix tilted her massive head, her wings folding around her like a cloak. "Different, yes. But only because you showed me the way. You saw a creature of rage and gave me a choice to be more. For that, I am grateful." Elias smiled, leaning back against the warm rock. "I didn't make you a queen, Valix. You chose that for yourself." She considered his words, her glowing eyes reflecting the moons. "Perhaps. But you reminded me I had a choice. That makes all the difference." As the stars stretched endlessly above them, the galaxy's most terrifying creature and the human who had seen her potential sat together in quiet companionship. Their journey had not only changed the galaxy, it had changed them both. Valix, the former terror of the void, was no longer alone. She was a queen, a protector, and above all, a symbol of what the galaxy could achieve when fear gave way to understanding.